welcome back to my channel. Today I am doing another video on things I didn't know that kind of shocked me about being pregnant with twins, having twins, and the postpartum journey. So I'm doing all the videos separate. I did a video on the twins pregnancy that shocked me, kind of the things of postpartum that were like crazy I didn't know about. And then specifically today, I'm going to do a delivery video because just the process of having your twins is wild. I feel like there are so many things that kind of surprised me when I went to the doctor's office and they were telling me about how it was going to be. And so I'm glad that I did a lot of research on this and I asked a lot of questions at the doctor's office because with the way our birth went, it went totally different than I thought it was going to, even up to the very few minutes before everything changed. I had HELLP syndrome, and so we had an emergency C-section. Up until then, we were going to have a vaginal birth, but I was so aware of the fact that I might have a vaginal birth, I might not, that I asked a ton of questions about both and learned a lot of stuff. So I'm going to share with you some of the things that I learned on my journey through the delivery process, and hopefully it helps you on yours. So I'm going to precursor this video by saying everybody's doctor, hospital, delivery place is different. So this may not be the norm or the policy at your hospital or from the OBGYN that you go to. This is just how my OB works, their office and what they prefer to do and what the hospital prefers to do. There's a million different ways to give birth. And I think that it's crazy that at the end, the only thing that matters is that we get our babies. And it's crazy that we worry about oh, if this or this is better. I think that a healthy baby and a healthy mom at the end is the only thing that's better. And it's actually the best thing. So definitely, I don't think that having a vaginal over cesarean is necessarily better. I was opting and hoping for a vaginal birth. I had heard the recovery from cesarean sections were a lot harder. That's why I was hoping for it, as well as knowing that during the birthing process, babies are given lots of good bacteria when they come down the birth canal. And it can be less traumatic to you and the baby. That being said, you can have a very healthy C-section, and people who opt for a C-section, that's fine too. I don't believe it's the easy way out. People I hear say that a lot. I feel like there's a lot of judgment, but after having a cesarean, I truly believe that it is just as brutal. It's major surgery. I was not allowed to do things for much longer than people who had a vaginal delivery around the same time as me and who were healed much quicker than I was. So I just want to say that. And now, this is stuff that my OB let us know. The first thing that surprised me was that I would be giving birth in the operating room no matter what. That's just the way my OB likes to do it. It is to make sure that if anything goes crazy or things change in an instant, they have the tools at hand to take care of it. Because twins are high risk, pregnancy and delivery, they're just doing what is best for you, or they feel is best for you, by being the most prepared in the most prepared spot. For my OB in my hospital, that was the operating room. If I was to deliver vaginally, I would have still been in the operating room. That being said, I also had an epidural in, even if I wasn't going to use the medicine in full. They put it in under the recommendation that if you have an epidural line in, even if you're only using it on the very bare minimum, which there's an adjustment, you can up the amount of medicine or keep it at the very lowest, that if you have a vaginal delivery and everything goes okay, you don't have to use a ton of medicine and it's in there. But if for some reason something happens either halfway through delivering one twin or before, you are already on an epidural line and they can do a C-section in an instant. If you don't have a line in and something major happens and in a second they have to make the decision to have an emergency C-section, you would have to go under general anesthesia. They would not be able to wait for you to let the epidural kick in if it was in an emergency situation. I was informed of this. I opted to have the epidural put in. We left it on the lowest setting and the lowest amount of medicine in it because I was hoping to, I had heard if you have too much up front, it can slow the laboring, and we were needing to deliver that night because my blood pressure was kind of out of control. Unfortunately, after a couple hours, I was not far along and my blood pressure was skyrocketing. I had started vomiting. I was starting to feel delirious. And they made the split second decision to have an emergency C-section to save my life as well as keep the babies healthy. I ended up with HELLP syndrome, which is like an extreme form of high blood pressure, liver failure, and kidney failure during the end of your pregnancy. And so when I went in, I was extremely ill. And they made that decision based on lab work that was rapidly declining. They were realizing that they couldn't keep my blood pressure under control. My liver and kidneys were doing terrible. And so they had to immediately go to C-section. And I'm so glad that I took their advice on the epidural line being in, because then they were able to pump more medicine into there, numb me, and I was able to be awake for the delivery. If I had not been, I would have been put under general anesthesia, and then I would have woken up hours later and met my babies then. But I did take my doctor's advice, and thank goodness I did, because the one in whatever chance it was that happened, it did happen, and I was able to be in the operating room and within minutes, and I was able to they were able to safely take out the boys via cesarean. So that makes me really happy that they gave me that option. I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know that I'd be delivering in the operating room before we started. Like halfway through my pregnancy, we talked about it. So I was already familiar with that, but the whole idea of having the epidural in just in case really paid off for me because of what happened. Because of the delivery in the operating room, I was only allowed to have one person. Some hospitals allow up to 2 to 3 support people, but in the operating room, there's only room for one person, one support person. So that was my husband. I was not able to invite anybody else to the birth, although after the whole thing, I don't think I probably would have. We really planned on it just being us. But if we had wanted other people in the room with us, that wouldn't have been an option because of the operating room. They need all the space they can. And that brings me to another thing that surprised me. Each baby has its own team. There's several nurses and a doctor for each baby in the operating room. I thought that was really cool after watching someone else's twin birth and realizing that there's a group of people assigned to each baby. I guess I just didn't think like how many people were going to be in there, but there's a lot of people. My husband was also able to gown up completely and be in there with me. And funny enough, he looked just like everybody else in his gown, and I had a hard time keeping track of him because I was very out of it during the delivery because I was ill, but also because he looked exactly like everybody else and was the same height as my delivering doctor. So that was kind of crazy. The last two things that surprised me have to do specifically with the babies themselves. One is that even if they're born early, ours were born at 35 weeks, they may not spend time in the intensive care unit, which is the NICU unit. A lot of people worry that when you deliver prematurely, their lungs and everything else aren't going to be as developed, which is why a lot of babies born early, premature, end up in the NICU. After our preterm labor scare, had a steroid shot that helped the baby's lungs develop. And so by the time that I gave birth at 35 weeks, the boys were strong enough not to go into the NICU, and we are forever grateful. But I didn't know that till after they came out because I just thought if they were early, they had to go. After they were cleaned up and they were monitored, they realized that everything, they were breathing on their own. They were able to feed on their own. And so the boys were able to stay with us. They never spent any time in the NICU. And that was really wonderful for us. I had no idea that that was even a possibility. I just figured if they were early, they wouldn't be able to stay out of the NICU. The other thing is kind of weird, but your whole pregnancy, whoever is closest to the cervix, whatever baby is closest to the cervix is baby A, and the baby who's furthest away is baby B. But babies can switch like right before birth or leading up to birth. And so baby A for most of the pregnancy, if they swap places, can then become baby B. And the same thing can happen during delivery. If for some reason they can't deliver the baby closest to the cervix first, that's usually how it goes. But if it doesn't, and they take out the other baby, that baby B now becomes baby A. So that was kind of cool. Like, I didn't realize that it switches, just whoever during pregnancy is closest to the cervix, but in delivery, whoever comes out first. So even though for us it was the same, they didn't move around much, and baby A came out first, there are instances where baby A and B can be swapped. Oh, I actually want to go back to two things about the something about the twin pregnancy or the delivery that I didn't realize. One, that there are instances where you have a vaginal birth and then something happens in between and then you have a cesarean. That doesn't happen very often, at very low, like 1 to 2% of twins born, but I didn't even know that was an option. And I'm so thankful that that didn't happen to us, obviously, but I can only imagine the recovery for moms who go through that. So if you were a mom who delivered one twin vaginally and one twin via C-section, you're my hero, because just recovering from the cesarean was so long that I can't even imagine if you had given birth both ways. And then the other thing is the incision, we're used to seeing just horizontal, but in cases where a twin gets stuck really high up and is not able to be pulled out, they can actually cut up. And so that's something I didn't know either. I watched the twin mom's birth video where their baby was stuck and they were cut up and to make it easier to get in. That was super scary. That also didn't happen to me, but I didn't know it was a possibility. And after watching her birth video, realized that, yeah, that can happen. You can have, there's lots of complications in twin pregnancies that can happen. And those are just two of the wildest ones, in my opinion. All right. And the last thing, after the whole babies can be baby A for a long time, then end up baby B, your babies, depending on their positioning in your stomach, can be a little squished. A lot of twin moms posted about this. Our babies, like, it's not really visible. I think because one was under my rib and one was down by my hip bone, that their heads were against my rib cage and my hip bone. And so I can tell there's a slight difference in the curvature of their little heads. In photos, it's literally impossible to tell. Our chiropractor kind of showed us the difference, and like you kind of have to like look ever so slightly. But what's funny is it's exactly opposite for both of them, because they were both positioned facing facing out. So one head, like their head on this side, they're both facing down. It was the right side, and on this baby, it was the left side. For Porter, it's on the left, and for Lewis, it's on the right. So just very interesting. Their heads are very malleable. As they grow, it's getting less and less obvious as the bones like change and grow as they get bigger. But it's just something that I'd seen other people. There are babies that come out with like square heads, flat heads, cone heads, even if they weren't born vaginally, because of the positioning in the womb. And so I thought that was really cool to see that it kind of also works itself out. I think in extreme cases, maybe they would use a helmet and reshape the baby's head. But I've seen like already the babies' heads are just changing and rounding themselves out. So super cool. Lots of stuff I didn't know about twin delivery, but I'm glad I asked a lot of questions and I watched a lot of videos like this. If there's something I missed and you had a twin delivery and something shocked or like surprised you, please put it in the comments below for other watchers. And as always, give this video a thumbs up if you like this kind of content, and subscribe if you want to continue following along with my postpartum journey. Thank you for tuning in, guys. Bye.